if you have free trade, so-called free trade, or you have globalisation, things will be moved and produced by the lowest common denominator. So if someone's making something or loading a ship cheaper than someone else, then that's got to flow across the world. It's got to be, it's got to push everything down, living standards, wages, conditions of all sorts of workers. They've got to be pushed down to whatever the lowest is anywhere in the world. Otherwise, big business can't compete.
On April 7th, 1998, Chris Corrigan, the boss of Patrick's Stevedores, in cohorts with the Howard government, unleashed a new phase of their plan to destroy the Maritime Union of Australia.
History tonight, mate. You're a part of history. Yeah. Sold out, years of struggle. Yeah. Years of struggle. Sold out for a couple of lousy dollars.
1,400 full-time workers at Patrick's, all members of the MUA, were locked out, and a non-union, or scab workforce, recruited from the military and the National Farmers Federation, trained by Patrick's, were brought in.
Unbelievable.
Show a bit of backbone and walk out!
Your neck's going to get sore looking over your shoulder.
Go and brainwashing!
Everywhere you go, you look behind something.
Show some principle! Tell them that you're Australian! Some backbone! And walk out! Not one of you has got any backbone! No principles! No nothing!
I don't think that was fair how they just kicked them all out like that.
Well, as the dispute unfolded, the public support grew and grew.
Standing by each other, and it's about the good things in this life. It's about holding your head high in a job and not walking around with your hands in your pants and shuffling your feet every time a boss comes up to you.
It was critical, and it was a rare dispute, I guess, in Australian history where the majority of the picket lines weren't manned, manned's probably not the, it's a bit sexist, but weren't attended by workers who were actually on strike. In the main, they were attended by supporters, by people that cared about the rights of people to have a trade union.
The most touching part of this whole setup that I saw was an old bloke pulled up there before we had a fence. The first night we moved into here, and we were blown everywhere. Well, he hobbled over on a walking stick with his wife helping him, and I said, "Come on, you want a cup of tea or a drink or something, old mate?" And he couldn't hardly hear or talk, but he said, his wife was telling me that he's an old waterside worker, and she said all he wants to do is make a donation. Well, I had to prise his fingers open, and there was $5. And it really, really touched my heart. I thought, my God, the conditions that I've fought for are nothing compared to what he did, and what this government's done now to bust it, it's just not on. I mean, I cried. I done a donation, and I thought that's nothing compared to what these people have done. It really made me cry.
The overriding mindset and all officials from all sides was to get the blokes back in the game.
And I have my house on the market, so
that's been pretty tough.
Well, I don't think you can get any tougher.
As the workers waited outside the gates, the dispute moved through the courts, where the political complexity of the Patrick's conspiracy was revealed. Months earlier, Chris Corrigan had shifted all the funds out of Patrick's, making it technically insolvent. Knowing it is illegal under corporations law to trade while insolvent, Chris Corrigan believed the courts would close the company down. The workers' jobs, wages and entitlements would go down with it.
There was this thing coming on, MUA is here to stay. But that's not what the kids said at the school. And she was really upset about it, that Dad was fighting for his job, but these kids were saying horrible things that their parents had told them, and she couldn't work out why. Because their parents were telling them, you know, that wolfies are bludgers and wolfies don't do anything, and a few explicit words, that she couldn't understand it.
And we're here to stay! And we're here to stay!
You're back again, eh? You just really like railways.
I've got a fetish for them.
Two weeks after the lockout, as community supporters rallied behind the sacked workers, the federal court met to deliver its verdict on the MUA Patrick's case.
Says the federal court in Melbourne has ordered the reinstatement of Patrick Stevedore's 1,400 waterfront workers.
There is also evidence that the Patrick owners and other owners in the Patrick Group, together with others, agreed on these unlawful acts as part of an overall plan to replace the workforce with non-union labour. This means that there is an arguable case that Patrick owners and Patrick employers have engaged in an unlawful conspiracy. Justice North, Federal Court.
I think the legal fight that they mounted was absolutely vital, and I think it was a really important part of a successful defence. And the reason I say that is that Corrigan and the government, who are clearly in day-to-day and strategic concert, I mean they were clearly working together, used the mechanism of sacking effectively the workers at Patrick's and re-employing them on bogus shelf companies and severing the employment relationship.
This group of 4,500 longshore workers in Los Angeles simply said that they had had a gutful of the casualisation of dock workers, of deunionisation of dock workers, and that they were going to make their stand with the Columbus, Canada, and they were not going to see scab cargo that had been loaded in Australia discharged in the port of Los Angeles. And that sent reverberations right throughout the shipping industry, right around the world. And in my opinion, their noble actions played such a pivotal role.
We very strongly feel that the Maritime Dispute is a turning point in Australia's industrial history, that we're seeing at the moment a mobilisation of the working class in Australia, which was shown in Melbourne the other night. There's the possibility that this could be won.
The business of the court is legality, just as it is not unknown in human affairs.
And everyone's got the sense that it could be won, and they're filled with a new spirit. And I think what Reith and Corrigan have probably succeeded in doing is reigniting the class struggle in Australia, which was put to sleep for 15 years under the Labor government. The unions have lost their spirit and their will to fight, and now we're seeing it revived again, and the possibility of a major, well, I'm not saying they're going to win it easily, but there's definitely a fight on, and the rank and file is coming out and supporting MUA, and they're seeing this as a decisive issue.
That have dominated the media during the last couple of weeks. This Lest it be thought our approach upholds anachronisms, it is worth observing that the law lying at the heart of this case is not some long-standing and outdated rule, but federal legislation enacted as recently as 1996 under the auspices of the present government.
The ironic twist was that the government's Freedom of Association clause in its own Workplace Relations Act actually backfired in favour of the union. This clause was meant to encourage workers to not join or belong to a union, but was used by the court to support the right of workers to not be discriminated against if they did belong to a union.
Discourteous to anybody if we confine our comments.
Workers were apprehensive. Some workers were sceptical about the court's pivotal role in the dispute and its ability to compromise more traditional forms of direct action.
And carefully considered the whole of Justice North's reasons for judgment, but we find them free from appellable error.
This union and the two unions that make up this union were born out of struggle, were born out of hardship, were born out of, when men had to carry 200 pounds on their back, when seamen had to live 15 in the cabin up forward with no conditions, and wharfies were died of asbestosis and mistreatment when they were lined up at the gates and picked by the boss. When seamen had no corner, no engagement system, they were singled out and the ones with the strongest back got a job. These are the things that built this union, and we'll never forget it. And the same as what we've probably not only learnt from history in this struggle, but we've in fact created our own history for the future.
What it actually was an ideological dispute, an attempt to smash trade unionism in Australia. If they had succeeded in completely smashing the MUA, they would have then immediately turned to other unions, probably such as the construction, mining, forestry union, or any other union that appeared to have some strength. They would have immediately turned to them.
On May the 4th, 1998, the full bench of the High Court upheld the earlier decision of the Federal Court ordering the complete reinstatement of the MUA workers on certain conditions. The MUA workers would work unpaid under administrators till Patrick's was viable.
Oh, it's very surprising actually. He's not one of the delegates and he's not one of the ones you would expect to be on the hit list. So they've just not let him in just to be confrontational by the looks of this.
Right. I thought 1400 were going back. Refused. Security said get out.
Look, driving away Subaru, tell me it's not starting.
And I thought the orders were 1400 to be reinstated, not 1399.
I think in the Port of Brisbane there were 10 workers still with, they're blacklisted, held outside the fence, and with apprehended violence orders against them. And some of those charges were absolutely fabricated. They were totally false. But these people weren't allowed to come inside the gate, so it put a lot of stress on them and their families, and it was a lesson to other workers. Don't stick your head up, don't even look sideways at a boss, or you'll find yourself with an apprehended violence order against you and you'll be put outside the gate. When we came back, every piece of paper and every notebook with all the phone numbers of all the agents and trucking companies and everyone we had to talk to had been ripped off the walls and taken.
The court's ordered that we start and finish in the same shift rosters that we had before we were locked out.
And all the records of what had happened while we'd been locked out, of what cargo was for what ship, that was all taken and hidden from us.
We have got 2.5 weeks to comply with viability of this port and of course nationally. And I dare say all these hurdles they're making in this establishment here at Maritime in Brisbane, I dare say all over Australia will be the same.
In the deed of settlement reached between Patrick's and the MUA, the union had to agree to drop conspiracy charges against Patrick Stevedores in order for the workers to have access to their entitlements and to the redundancy funds. A vital legal opportunity that would call on documents revealing the conspiracy of the Howard government and Patrick's to the general public was lost. A few weeks later, the MUA held stop-work meetings around the country to endorse Patrick's new enterprise bargaining agreement.
And as we enter a campaign now for the upcoming federal election, you'll see quite clearly that Peter Reith is now using as part of their platform a second wave of industrial relations reform.
Recently tied us up in knots, you know, and if we'd have broken those arbitration laws, you'd get away with it for a while, but within time you would actually probably break the union financially, and then you can't do anything.
This was not a normal enterprise agreement negotiation. It was not. It was born of the situation that was inflicted on us by the Patrick's group of companies and Chris Corrigan, starting in September of last year with the corporate scam he put in place. We found ourselves in a position where we had to reach a negotiated settlement in this dispute. We did all the hard work. We did all the hard work on the picket line, all around the country, to get back in the gate. That was our first goal, get back in the gate. And that's what we did. And I can tell you, the leaders of this union over many, many years have you all looking at us now, and if we ended up back out the gate, they'd say, what in the bloody hell are you doing? What in the bloody hell are you doing? There is no way you can win a dispute out the gate.
I was talking to an old fellow the other day, happened to be an old man. He said to me they finally got you right back to that far right swing of the pendulum, back to where you were 100 years ago. Hopefully the Christ it ain't going to take us 100 years to get anywhere near like back where we were. But if we pull together, it'll be a lot easier road. You're talking about equity in the pick and that. You might remember one of the great fathers of our union, Jim Healy, when they had the bond system going. The reason they got around that, one fella getting 5 days a week and the other fella getting nothing, was by pulling together. Don't step up to the first line if you had a day's work yesterday. Let your mate beside you have a go. Think of the bloke beside you.
Paul is a fighter, but then again you're talking about a Wolfie's son. That's a Wolfie. And Paul's father, he won't take intimidation. And neither will Paul, and neither will I.
What should have been called for was a general strike to paralyse the employers and paralyse the government, to show the weakness of the government.
A national strike at that moment wouldn't have been successful. I don't think we would have had thousands of people out. And that we never know the truth because we never can run that scenario again. But I think the risks of it were very real for creating violent male images around an issue which was really about the future of employment conditions and fairness in the employment contract.
They'd have just said, oh, what do they want? What do these blokes want? We've supported with money, we've supported with a presence on the picket lines, we've supported with food. What do they want?
You can go down the toilet with the flag flying as a labour movement by taking traditional strike action.
You've got to think about it, whether the tactics, whether the strategy right from the start was the correct strategy. Is it the correct strategy these days for unions to go down the legal avenue? Or should we be taking a second look at the more traditional methods that we used in the past that got us the gains that we won? Because the courts are always going to be against us. If we stick to the courts and go down the legal avenue, we're always eventually going to hit that brick wall.
We had two options. One, get beat, or secondly, survive.
I urge people to vote in favour of the document.
We were going to be left in a position that would be impossible, which was what happened in the end. When the final offer was put to us, as horrendous as it was, there was nowhere for the workers to turn.
The new enterprise bargaining agreement introduced a range of workplace changes and losses in conditions.
They want to get rid of every permanent and they just have everybody sitting at home at their own beck and call. If you don't perform, you just won't get picked up. There's no worry about getting sacked. There's no worry about getting redundancy. They just won't pick you up. They'll starve you out. It's as simple as that.
700 full-time jobs were destroyed. When many workers left, generations of working class history left with them.
I took redundancy because I had some health problems arising out of doing 27 and a half years of shift work. I knew that I could not do compulsory 12-hour shifts at the employer's discretion. On the day I walked out of the wharf on a Friday, they didn't even tell us that we were finished that day. I couldn't say goodbye to my mates because I didn't know whether I'd be back on Monday. And I didn't know till Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, when a distraught local official rang me and said, "Mick, it's a disgrace. None of you have been told that you finished yesterday." He said, "They've just given me the names." He said, "I'm trying to catch everyone now and tell them." And when I walked out, I could feel that beside me was my father and both my grandfathers and my mother's only brother and three of my father's brothers, who were all waterside workers. The only one who's alive is my mother's brother, who's 86 now, 87. And the ghosts of all those old men was walking out with me. And I felt like I deserted what they fought for.